Call Catherine Delahunty.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou te wharenenia, which I'm saying the tired house, because I feel we're all a bit tired. I'd like to take a short call. We're supporting the bill. We have some reservations about it, but we're supporting it. But actually, the internet is the Wild West. The internet is as the Wild West once was before the sheriff came into town. And I think this bill is an attempt to bring the sheriff into town, which is why we're supporting it. We think it needs to happen. It'll be, as my previous speaker said, there is a need for a more consistent and relative approach to a lot of aspects of internet control, but we think it's important to start addressing those, and it would be good to do them consistently. However, the harder question is why, now that we have the net, do we have this enormous proliferation of people who want to watch hideous images of exploitation of children? And we can individualise that and say that these people are sick, which no doubt is a very good argument, but it's more than individual. There is a culture across the planet that regards children and to some extent women as objects for the kind of sad gratification that is based on the idea of power over and objectification of the vulnerable. And this bill is going to deal with some of that, and that's why we're supporting it, but it cannot address the fundamental outpouring of sickness that we have around our sexuality. And we don't want to talk about that often, but actually this bill does bring it up. This bill are the numbers that the Minister has quite rightly named of people who are guilty of this kind of behaviour, tells you we've got a problem. And it's not about being moralistic, it's about a deeper question of, and it's not about being righteous and sanctimonious, it's about saying, how did we get here? How did we get here, and how did the internet, that supposed bastion of greater democracy and freedom, become a bastion of abuse? Because you can be damn sure that our children are not benefiting, whether they are victims of the actual abuse or whether they are unsupervised and get to see it in the objectification of their childhood. So something is very wrong, not only in the state of Denmark, as Hamlet said, but in the society when we see this kind of abuse. So this bill will address some of that. We do have some reservations. We are supporting it all the way, but we have reservations around the sentencing, because given the depth of the sickness across the society, actually giving more prison sentences will not solve the problem, because the floodgate is open, and without a transformative, educational, rehabilitative, intense process for the people who are going to be locked up, we're not going to make change. And locking them up for longer is not going to change the illness in their consciousness. So we don't want to be under any illusions about how locking people up for a long time will fix the problem and stop other people who are flooding to join this particular sick trade or the sick process of so-called recreation. So it asks us deeper questions. We would not support the increase in sentences. We don't believe going from 10 to 14 years, not only for the arguments of consistency with non-internet criminal offences, but also because we just don't think it's going to work. And if there's one thing we should try and test legislation against in Parliament, is it actually going to work? Because just doing things for the sake of rhetoric, and so we feel we're doing something about these terrible people, is not good law and will not work. I am passionate about changing the way we protect our children from abuse, including on the internet. I am supportive of that 100% in a way that might work. So yes, we need to deal with the education rehabilitation programs that must be available to people who are locked up for this, but we must also look at ourselves in the mirror. What is going on? Why is it people that we know, and they are people that we will know statistically, who indulge in this? What's driving it? And I would argue that the marketing of the sexualisation of children is something that goes on across our society. If you only have to go to the clothing for young girls under the age of 10. You only have to look at the children's beauty contests. It's much worse in the United States than it is here, because we've actually resisted some of this. But we need to resist it. We need to stop promoting an idea of beauty, which is actually sexualising children. And okay, we've got good boundaries, but not everybody has. Well, the pageant is part of the problem, and it always was. But actually, We need to do something about protecting children right across society so that we don't feed the sickness that children are objects for the gratification of adults in any way whatsoever. So although we support the provisions of the bill, we cannot see these provisions addressing the underlying problems. We don't support increasing offences sentences because there's no evidence. And you know, one thing would be great, Mr. Speaker, is evidence that would actually stop people from reoffending. And also, we believe that there is a societal context that sometimes the punishment pretends to address but fails to address. So punishment isn't going to stop this, but a deep, hard look at our own attitudes in society and what we market to our children and what we use the net for is required. However, we will be supporting the bill. We do think it's important that we do something about this, and we recognise that it's a genuine attempt, even though we feel that it will not substantially change the sickness in a society that objectifies women and children and makes them vulnerable to predators. We have to ask ourselves, in what way do our infrastructure, social structures and businesses collude with the predators? Rather than just saying, lock up the predator, throw away the key, block them from the internet, everything will be fine. It is not fine. It is sad and it is sick, and we are part of it, and we can be part of changing it. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, we will support the bill, but we would like to see a far less punitive but more substantial approach. Yes, these crimes should be named as crimes, but let's look at where the crimes actually come from. Kia ora tātou.
I call Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to make a short contribution to the debate on this bill. New Zealand First will be supporting the bill. At second reading, however, my colleague Dennis O'Rourke